Someone to Love. Chapter 1. London. Sidney Parker stared into the fire after returning from another tedious engagement. They seemed to be endless, and he needed to come up with a valid excuse to miss the next dinner party. Eliza was a social butterfly who was determined to enjoy the spotlight that had been cast on her with their recent engagement. He was trying to keep his promise, but didn't have the energy or heart. He was a young woman he should be preparing to marry instead of being paraded around like a prize bull. Tonight had been extremely difficult as Lady Woodchester had been present at this dinner party, announcing her intention and inviting her dear friend Charlotte Heywood for the coming winter season. The thought of Charlotte being courted by other men turned his stomach, and without realising it, threw the empty glass into the flames. Sidney, how was the dinner at Lady Hargrave's? Were you able to convince her to visit Sanditon? Tom anxiously asked from the doorway. It was all his brother ever spoke about, and he was tired. The building must be rebuilt first before we start making promises. This is how you got into trouble, and we cannot accept kings until we are certain. Sidney gritted out while collecting a bottle he planned to finish in his room alone. We have to make it a success. Tom followed Sidney as he mounted the stairs, not bothering to keep quiet as Mary and the children were in Sanditon. Sidney suddenly stopped mid-flight as he realised Tom should be in Sanditon and not London. They had agreed that he would be the contact person in London, and Tom remained to oversee the building work. What are you doing here in London? Sidney startling Tom by his curt question. Investigating the possibility of having a military base built in Sanditon, Tom announced excitedly. He'd received a message from a colonel asking permission to set up a temporary army camp and had already started imagining a permanent soldier settlement. He was planning to set up a meeting with the Home Office to begin negotiations. Military base? Don't be ridiculous. They cost communities more money than what they would bring. We must focus on the rebuild and no other projects. Sid pointing his finger at Tom. They had enough issues and didn't need the militia causing problems. Closing his door in Tom's face and then opening it again as he suddenly suspected Tom had already given his permission. Tom, you have not made any promises. Well, they were near Sanditon, and I decided to take the initiative. Arthur will be there to welcome them, and I am certain it will bring more people to our town. They have their own tents and will be camping on the outskirts of town. This will help in the rebuilding of Sanditon, and you should not be concerned. All is in hand. Tom making a quick exit before his brother really lost his temper. Sidney slammed the door to communicate his frustration, and after a moment of contemplation began packing, as there needed to be someone watching over this camp full of soldiers. Somewhere between Wellington and Sanditon. Charlotte clutched the letter as the carriage carried her towards Sanditon. It had only been a month since she had left the seaside village, but it had been an emergency. Georgiana had taken ill and had sent an urgent request for her assistance. The Parkers are in London, and Georgiana is alone without any family. Charlotte had pleaded with her parents to travel to Sanditon. After hearing about the young woman's fragile health, they reluctantly agreed she could go, but only if Alison accompanied her. Alison, who had never been outside of Wellington, couldn't believe her fortune. Even though Charlotte had been clear they were visiting Sanditon to nurse Georgiana, Alison was determined to find them both husbands. Their father had been inviting several local gentlemen for dinner, and she refused to become a farmer's wife. While Charlotte packed herbs and medical supplies, Alison filled their trunks with gowns. "Be careful," Mr. Heywood repeated the same morning when he had taken Charlotte aside before they began their journey. "Not everyone is who they seem." Charlotte finished before kissing him on the cheek. She had learnt her lesson and would be careful. Alison, not hearing a word, was already dreaming of meeting her future husband on the beach of Sanditon. "Miss Lamb was kind enough to send us a carriage." Alison settled into the cushioned seat after waving goodbye to the family out of the window. She had never known such luxury and was determined to become the best of friends. "Alison, Georgiana needs genuine friends," Charlotte warned her sister. Alison's heart was in the right place, but often spoke before contemplating the meaning of her words. "I truly wish to be her friend, not for her money," pouted Alison, as she looked out the window while they moved through the countryside, asking many questions until she fell asleep with her head on Charlotte's shoulder. Charlotte, wide awake, spent the journey wondering what was to come once they arrived in Sanditon. The moment she spotted the sea, she woke Alison, as she didn't want her sister to miss the sight. The water sparkling as the sun hit the surface, and the fishing boats signalled they were nearing their destination. They were not the only ones, as the road was full of carts carrying building materials. Mary, in her last letter, describing the chaotic activities as the builders rushed to be ready for the summer season. Eliza Campion's money certainly helping in the rebuilding, and Charlotte reminded herself Sidney's choice had saved his family. "Beautiful. It is exactly how you describe in your letters, Charlotte. No wonder you were downcast when returning to Wellington." Alison's eyes sparkled as they remained fixed on the seascape. Charlotte remained silent, as she had not spoken about her doomed romance with Mr. Sidney Parker, taking a quick breath as the carriage passed the spot where they had last seen each other. There was little danger of seeing Sidney, as he was in London, and Charlotte forced herself to look towards the town that was appearing over the hill. After having a trouble-free journey, their carriage was pushed off the road by one of the heavy-loaded carts, Charlotte and Alison being thrown from their seats as the carriage lurched to the side as the driver battled to control the horses. Shouts were heard over the distressed horses, and it was clear they were not the only ones affected by the near collision. The door to their carriage was opened, and a man wearing a military uniform popped his head through the door, his eyes assessing them before speaking. "My name is Colonel Francis Lennox of the 35th. We have a surgeon who will see to your injuries and promise to take you to your accommodations in Sanditon," holding out his hand to assist them out of the carriage. "Thank you. My name is Charlotte Heywood, and this is my sister Alison." Charlotte spoke while holding a handkerchief to Alison's forehead, the Colonel calling for one of his captains to carry Alison, while he personally assisted Charlotte. "Are you injured?" he asked, with concern etched on his face as he noticed a bruise forming on her cheek. "It is only a bruise, and I am concerned for my sister." Charlotte dismissed her injuries. "You have been injured, Miss Heywood, and I would be shirking my duty if I don't ensure your injuries are tended to." Lennox taking it of her hand and steered her towards their surgeon. But their progress was halted by a loud, booming voice that was heading in their direction. "Out of my way! Out of my way!" Sidney had ridden through the night and was not pleased to see damaged material on the ground. His eyes scanning the area and froze when seeing the woman who had been haunting his dreams.